Hi, everyone, and welcome to Meet the Experts. This is a monthly series where we invite people from Soldo to share how they work. Things like how they manage spend, how they structure their teams, and the best practices that they've put in place. The goal is to combine real life experience and with how Soldo supports those processes. And to kick things off, I'm joined by Thomas, our financial controller at Soldo, who's going to share how he approaches all of this in his day to day. Hi, Thomas.
Hi everyone.
So before we dive in, it'd be great to understand a bit more about your background and how you got here.
All right, I'm gonna try to do it quickly, but it's a bit of a long story. So I'm originally from Lithuania. I came to the UK about 22 years ago or so, and the plan was just to go to uni and leave and go back home. But I'm still here 22 years later. So as probably most students have, my first career was in hospitality, but then I realized that that's not for me. I decided to do masters in accountancy and finance, and then ended up working as an accountant and studying through my ACCA qualification. I was then in a not-for-profit sector for a long time when I decided that again I want to move into sort of commercial sector, and then I moved into sort of startups about 9 years ago, and that's where I really found my home, and I realized that this is where I'm most comfortable and happiest. And I have been in startups obviously ever since. I've been with Solder for about 9 months now. I have been in another financial services company previously for about 3 years. So yeah, and here I am. I'm really happy being here.
Good to hear that. So what does a typical month look like for you, Thomas? I'm assuming there is a typical month in your area. What does that include for you?
I'd say there is and there isn't a typical month. I'd say there are weeks in a month that are typical every month. As you may or may not know, we obviously have to prepare financial statements for each month after the month is finished. So we call that process month end. And the beginning of the following month would be very similar to the beginning of the previous month. So in that sense, that's sort of almost rinse repeat scenario. But the rest of the month, it really is not the same as previous month. It can be very, very different because there's also other cyclical things in our lives. Like for example, I'm currently going through the audit, which is obviously annual. There's things like quarterly reporting to investors, which is obviously quarterly. There's various tax return that are also, either bi-monthly, quarterly, or annual again. There's ad hoc projects that I get involved in that are to do with our own product development and changes in the company. There's obviously things like teams changing, hiring, firing, managing. So all of those things can be very, very different, and one day not necessarily going to be the same as the other day. And that's, I think, also a nature of being in a scale up or a startup. That 2 days are never really the same, and I think that's one of the reasons why I love being in this sort of environment.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. So with all of that going on, how do you manage responsibility across your team? How is it split?
So traditionally, the financial controllership team, if you will, is always split in a similar way, where you have your accounts payable or AP, you have your accounts receivable or AR. So accounts payable obviously make sure that all our suppliers are paid, all our employees' expenses are paid, and accounts receivable make sure that we are paid. And then you have your management accountants, which are people based in different countries based on where we have subsidiaries that prepare the financial statements for those subsidiaries. So these are people that sort of prepare the draft versions of what I then do get involved at the end of the month, and this is the information that goes to the board, goes to the investors, goes to other business stakeholders. So this is really how the team is split into sort of three pillars, where you have your financial management, reporting, accounts payable, and accounts receivable.
Right. Okay. So it sounds like a busy function. I'm sure it is, and you've explained how some things are regular, other things come in ad
Mhm.
hoc through the year. How do you maintain control over transactions without being involved in everything? How do you manage your time and your involvement?
It's a good question, and it is impossible to maintain control of every single transaction. Otherwise, I'd be working 24-hour days. But I think the way I look at it, for me, it's very important to gain trust of my team and of my direct reports, and obviously that comes with them being well trained and being supported, and them having also uh, you know sort of the ability and being comfortable of speak up and ask for help when needed. Once you gain trust and build trust between the team members, you kind of have to trust that they're going to do their job, which is
Yeah,
obviously part of your own job, but you can't police every single transaction. Obviously, there are steps in my day to day where I review things, especially sort of at the very end, let's say just before the financial statements are prepared. I will review for variances and things like that, but I never look at every single thing because I have to trust my team that they will do their job well, how other people trust me to do my job well.
yeah, great answer. Um, what are the things in finance that you're not responsible for that people often assume you are?
I think I think common misconception is that people assume the finance are responsible for all of the spend of the company for sort of every single transaction. That they think that we police what the company is spending money on, and that is very far from the truth. Because again, we need to delegate this responsibility to different department heads, who ultimately are the responsible budget holders for their own spend. Um, well, we maintain certain financial control, make sure that certain policies are followed, etc. We don't tell what they should be spending on because we're not experts in their field. We're just there to support and be like a business partner rather than, this sort of policing function that most people think we are.
Yeah, yeah, another great answer. Thank you for that. So now we have a bit more of an idea about how your team works. Let's talk about the tools that support that setup. Walk us through your current stack if you can, Thomas, and tell us how everything fits together and sort of the different roles that each one plays in your day to day.
Sure. So I'm just going to sort of go back to the basics. So, obviously, for our AP, we use mainly Soldo, which is obviously our own platform. So every employee has a Soldo card. Every department will have a Soldo departmental card. So a lot of our company spend will go through our own platform. So obviously, that's super important in our stack. That then is directly connected to our financial accounting system or ERP system called NetSuite. So we get the data pulled in directly from our own platform into NetSuite for all of that spend. Then obviously NetSuite is also used for other financial sort of tasks like month-end adjustments and things like that. And then that's when we get to the point where sort of the financial numbers for the month are sort of ready. And then we recently introduced a third sort of pillar in the stack, which is this tool called Numeric AI, which essentially reads all the data live from NetSuite on a line by
Mm.
line basis. So every single different expense line will be read, but that's only sort of read only mirror of your data in accounting system. And this is accessible to everybody in the business if they want to, as a sort of read only view of our live financial information. And this is what we use for sharing this information with other departments so they can spot where maybe spend is missing during the month rather than wait till the month is over to let us know that something's wrong. We also use this tool to collaborate between all of my team on different month-end tasks that we do in one place. And we also use this tool for reporting now and for analysis, where because it's AI based, it can help us explain various abnormalities or differences or variances in our financial statements by digging into sort of more detailed data of each sort of expense line automatically. Like AI does it for us and might pick up things like, oh, the supplier has an invoice due this month, or this hasn't happened, or somebody posted invoice twice, or there's various things like that. So it really helps us be sort of more proactive than reactive. So this is sort of the current stack. We obviously have our own billing engine, which is how we invoice our customers, etc. But I'm not going to get into that today.
Great. Okay. So that sounds fascinating, and it's obviously interesting, isn't it? How you've described tools, not just the tools themselves, but how they work together to give you
Mhm.
that flow. Where does the process typically start from your perspective?
I think I say everything really starts with AP or accounts payable. So, obviously that 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 is where most problems occur. That's where the
Right.
volume is highest, and that's what the most important thing to get right in any business. If you've got no idea what you're spending money on, if invoice is being allocated to incorrect budget lines, then you got yourself a big problem because by the time it comes to financial reporting, um, you're gonna spend days and days trying to dig into these issues, trying to understand what happened and when it went wrong. If you get this right from the beginning, then by the time it comes to the reporting, it should be easy. So that's where it really starts. It's actually capturing the spend correctly. Um, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm hearing is all of these amazing tools are great, but unless we get that accuracy and clean data at the start, then
Yeah.
we're picking up problems as we go through the process. Is that right?
ex- Exactly. Exactly
Okay.
that.
Okay. Let's zoom in a bit then on Soldo itself,
Mhm.
and specifically where our product sits within our ecosystem. So,
Mhm.
from your perspective, tell us a bit more about Soldo's place in the stack and how it works for you.
So, like I said, Soldo sort of, if you look from left to right, Soldo is at the very left, at the very beginning of the cycle, if you will. It's obviously it's a way for us to give every employee ability to spend, obviously, to spend money for the business purposes, but to spend without spending their own money, which in most companies would be expected to. But secondly, this is also obviously where we can control our spend real time on things like subscriptions, on various business
Mm,
spend on development of employees, on like company events and things like that. So a lot of our spend is captured through our platform. Saldo cannot process your traditional sort of invoice payments to suppliers like maybe some other competitors can, but that's really not a big issue for us because the majority of our spend actually goes through Soldo cards, which we
yeah.
can which we can see straight away as it happens, pretty much.
Mm, yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, great. So it's interesting what you said there. Are there specific features um, in our product, in the Soldo product, that have made or do make a real difference for you that you perhaps haven't had access to before?
If I think about what I had before, I'd say probably and I might mention a couple of things. I think one of the best things that I like about it is that you have your sort of company card platform and employee expense platform in one place. So instead of handling out of pocket expenses through one system like Expensify, for example, and then having, let's say credit cards with like your traditional bank for business spend, where we have two very different processes, very different flows of information. You have everything in one place. So that's really, really good and really makes like, if you simplify things in finance, it makes life easy. And secondly, I think ability to control spend before the spend happens. So, setting certain limits or rules, or, or because we obviously pre-fund the cards. So, like rather than just giving an employee a credit card with a limit, and then, when something's wrong, it's after the fact the thing's already happened. Whilst we can not enforce, but we can set the guardrails before so that make sure that, everything sort of goes well and where it's supposed to do.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, when I speak to customers, which I sometimes have the privilege to do, I absolutely agree. They love this idea that you can set, as you say, guardrails around
Mm.
different spend pieces and just make sure that you've got that real time visibility. I think that's a huge bonus.
Yeah.
From in your role though, Thomas, just staying with that for a moment, staying with this idea that we can monitor what's happening. What are the specific metrics and signals that you're paying attention to? What is it important that you focus on to make sure that we do stay within the boundaries that we've set, to make sure that we are enabling accurate data to flow through the process? What are some of the things that you're looking for?
So obviously we have sort of the mandatory information that each transaction should have in our system, and that's information that we as finance need to be able to account for that transaction correctly, to be able to claim tax for that transaction correctly, and to be able to justify to the auditors if we need to that this is what the person spent money on and this is why. So the metrics obviously, like if those fields or that information is missing, so we look for sort of the percentage of transactions that are missing this data, and then we look into why, and maybe there are specific departments or specific even uh, like people that we need to discuss this with to make sure that they sort of don't do that in the future to make everybody's lives easier. So missing things is obviously a metric. Then time. So how long does it take for somebody to provide this information? How long does it take for the manager to approve somebody's spend? If somebody's taking 2 weeks to approve that direct report spend, again, it doesn't work because by that point the ship has sailed. Really, we're already in the middle of the following month, and if somebody says, "Oh, this should have not happened or should have gone somewhere else," we can't really change the past when it's that delayed. So we look for the sort of the quickness of approvals and quickness of providing the mandatory data. Those would be the two main important things that I look into, and report. We sort of report on this every month, and we try to address this every month, because we should be leading by example here, given that we're using our own product and we're selling it to other companies.
Yeah,
We should
yeah,
have 0% missing receipts, and we should have 3-day approvals like we ask everybody to. We're
mm,
not there quite yet, but I think we'll get there.
yeah. And of course, that's the human element, isn't it, that we speak about, um, which brings us nicely into this next piece, which is really about what drives efficiency in the way that you have set up the team, in the way that you operate. What are some of the things that you can point to that you feel we do get right, and that does make a difference in terms of how effectively and how efficiently we close month end or work through figures?
So I think obviously like product improvements that we had recently really helped us sort of close quicker. So things like better OCR, thing where our system sort of picks up on the data just from the uploaded document or receipt, and pre-fills that for the employee. That's really helpful. And sort of setting like spending categories where again it automatically recognizes that if you went to Tesco's and bought a sandwich, that's going to go to the meals expense line. If you went and booked something on Trainline, that's going to go to your train travel. So things like that, automation, is what really drives efficiency, rather than us having to firstly check that the employee entered all of that correctly, or then even do it ourselves. A lot of this is correctly picked up by um, non-human element, I guess, but
Mm.
that really drives efficiency. So improvements like that, and I'm sure AI is also going to play part in this whole thing. Is going to make our lives better because we will be able to do things quicker.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Of course, there is always this idea that we work in our own sort of little swim lanes, but you
Mhm.
have to work across so many different parts of the business. How do you what have you found are some of the great ways to collaborate with other teams, make sure that all the different elements are coming together so that we do get you the best data in a timely fashion? What have you learned about working closely with other teams to get that so that you can deliver the best results from your perspective?
I think firstly, you can't be angry, at someone for not knowing something if you don't actually actively try to educate and inform the company that this is how things are supposed to work. So, as you know, since I have joined, we have tried to make a little bit more effort in running the sort of all company meetings or presentations about different parts of what's expected from them and what do we do as a finance team to let them know what good looks like, to let them know that we're there to help, to let them know where to find information, to let them know how to do things properly. So I think obviously that is very important. Then actively engaging with the teams and with individuals if you need to, where things are going wrong, instead of just sort of letting it go and like, or thinking like, oh, they only missed one or two receipts, it's okay, what's the point of speaking to them. So like, having that conversation, making sure that they understand what needs to be done, how they need to do it, to understand if they don't know how to do it, where to get help from a P team, for example. So yeah, it's just like basically having this continuous sort of working relationship with all the departments,
Mm.
but also giving them the all of the necessary tools to do this correctly, uh, rather than just assuming that they will find this themselves by looking. And other people don't have time to go and look
Yeah.
for how to submit expense reports correctly if you don't actually kind of like show it to them, where they just have to then focus for half an hour and
Yeah.
learn, and then I think that will make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. What struck me there when you were talking, Thomas, is and I've been again I've been very privileged to be part of those sessions where where you've educated the business in the right way of doing things, the best way to do things. In terms of the different elements, the different parts, the different functions we have in Soldo, I would imagine that there are some differences in how people work. I can imagine
Mm.
marketing works very differently to our technology team, for example. How much flex do you allow to match how different functions like to work? Because obviously you have certain things which you have to deliver and are
Mhm.
non-negotiable. But how much flex are you able to show to match how other departments like to work? And how does Soldo help you do that? How does our product help you flex to match how people prefer to work in terms of spend across a typical month?
I would, so there's obviously some like non-negotiables. We can't let one department get away with something that we would not let as a business, for example. But
Yeah.
like things like like if some department wants to pretty much spend all of the budget through Solder platform, for Solder cards, and they want to manage, let's say marketing wants to do, the online marketing through one card. They want to do marketing events for another card, and they want to, I don't know, buy advertising or PR for a third card. We can also accommodate that. We can create three wallets, three cards. We can make sure that this is possible, that there's enough money for them to do that. If that makes them control the budget better and have that information, uh, it really works for us as well, because we have a very sort of controlled, um, but easy way for us to also track that spend. But if other departments want to, just have one soldo card for like team lunches and company events and things like that, like that they do, and go the normal invoice route, where we pay for the bank, that's also fine. So, like our platform is so flexible, where you can create, unlimited wallets and limited cards. You can have different currencies, have different amounts, preset different rules, and have the data flow into our accounting system. you know, I would encourage us to use our platform more than go the traditional invoice route, if you will, because that data then goes uh, into our system straight away, and it's like a live flow rather than a little bit of a
Mm.
delay when you maybe agreed to spend with a supplier, and by the time you get an invoice, like finance might have not known that this is coming, and things like that. So
Yeah.
real-time spend management is definitely preferred.
Yeah. 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 And it made me think when you were talking then about something you said earlier. You said, one of the misconceptions is that you are either the parent or the police in making sure that people know what to spend, when to spend, how to spend. And of course, each function has its own autonomy in that area.
Mhm.
And because of the way that our platform is able to show real-time spend, I'm guessing that functions can also see themselves how much is left in each wallet, how much of the budget they've spent. They don't rely on you as a finance team to constantly feed back into them, do they?
Exactly that. That's exactly that. So obviously, one of the reasons why I didn't mention numeric before, why we introduced that is because for the teams that don't go through our platform, but they still want to somehow know, oh, what they have spent, like in the first 2 weeks of the month. In the traditional stack, you wouldn't be able to tell them that until the month end is done or month is closed. So they would have to wait and then see, and then they might find, oh, things are missing or things are not, supposed to be there, and that makes your sort of close process really delayed. So obviously with numeric, they can sort of monitor that live. But if you go through our platform, you know, both finance and themselves can monitor that on a daily basis because you can go and log into your wallet and see what the money's been spent on, how much money is left.
Mm.
It becomes even easier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you if you left Soldo, and we really don't want you to, Thomas, we want you to stay, but if you left Soldo, um, would Soldo be one of the products that you'd advocate for as soon as you got into your new role? Is it that important?
Honestly, like, and I'm not just saying that because I work at Soldo, I would. And I actually I even got involved in one of the sales pitches and sold it to my fiance's brother's company. He's got a big crane business in Northampton, and they've just introduced Soldo. So I'm obviously, if I'm recommending it to family members, I would obviously recommend it to other people if I left.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. So one last question. If you had to give one piece of advice to other financial controllers in building their stack and managing their processes and best practices, uh, what would you be telling them?
I would say probably one piece of advice is when you think about your setup and your stack, if you will, you must design it in a way where all of those tools talk to each other. If there's no data flow between the tools, even if they're the best individually in what they do, you're setting up yourself for some sort of manual process. Manual process
Yeah.
means human error. Human error means mistakes, etc. So
Mm.
make sure that you eliminate that and you get tools set that the data flows freely, automatically between each other. And all you have to do is then just sort of, the reporting part at the end of it.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Thomas. It was really insightful, and it's great to see um, how modern finance stacks come together in practice, and hear from you about some of the tools that we use, such as NetSuite and
Cool.
Numeric, and of course our own
Yeah, yeah.
platform. Hopefully, we have between us given everyone a clearer view of how to
Hopefully.
build a more efficient, scalable finance setup. And I just want to say thank you for joining everyone, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next session of Meet the Experts. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.